Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the shadowy depths of England's Game of Thrones, the Wars of the Roses, where cousins clawed at crowns and the air hung heavy with betrayal. Did you know over 50,000 souls perished in this family feud that turned brothers into butchers, or that a single king's fertile loins doomed a nation to decades of dagger-sharp drama? What if your own family tree hid thorns sharp enough to topple empires? Or worse, what secrets lurk in your ancestry that could unravel everything you thought was secure? Imagine stepping back to a time when loyalty was as fleeting as a candle's flicker, and power tasted like iron on your tongue. Questions like these keep historians up at night, debating if it was ambition or fate that painted the roses red with blood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the drafty halls of Windsor Castle, the chill seeping through your thin wool tunic like fingers from the grave, the damp stone walls whispering secrets that make your skin prickle as if icy blades are grazing your neck, and you wonder how a place so grand could feel like a tomb, waiting to swallow you whole. The year's 1327, but it might as well be a fever dream, with the flickering torchlight casting long shadows that dance like restless spirits across the tapestries depicting battles won and kingdoms claimed, their flames sputtering in the musty air that smells of wet earth and old blood, a scent that clings to your nostrils and reminds you of forgotten graves unearthed after a storm. You are no king yet, just a silent observer in this medieval maze, your heart pounding as you hear the distant clamour of knights clashing swords in the courtyard below, their grunts echoing like thunder in your chest. But the real storm brews not outside but within these walls, where Edward III, the bold visionary who would become the image of a medieval monarch, paces before you, his battle-hardened frame radiating an energy that makes the air hum with possibility. Yet you sense the undercurrent of rivalries bubbling beneath, like a pot about to boil over in a kitchen where the cook has turned his back. Edward's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scan the room as if already envisioning the conquest that will define him. But you shiver at the thought that his greatest triumph, siring 5 surviving sons, will become his curse. Each boy a prince with lands, wealth, and ambitions that fester like untreated wounds, their whispers in these halls sounding like the hiss of serpents coiling around a throne. You feel the weight of it already, the iron taste on your teeth from biting back unspoken fears, as Edward dreams of France, igniting the 100 Years' War with victories that turn him into a legend. But historians still argue whether his bold campaigns were genius or folly, draining England's coffers worse than a modern stock market crash and sowing seeds of discontent among the nobles who foot the bill. Absurdly, in an era when knights wore armour hammered from recycled ploughshares, talk about upcycling gone medieval. Edward's court buzzes with chivalric ideals that mask the filth of reality, where lice crawl in your hair like tiny traitors, and the injustice of serfs toiling in fields below hits you like a punch to the gut, their backs bent under the same sun that gilds the king's golden crown. You step closer to the hearth, seeking warmth that never quite reaches your bones, the wet wool of your cloak clinging like a second skin that's too tight, too heavy, and you can't help but smirk at the irony. Here's a king bolder than a viral TikTok challenge, conquering France while his own house divides like a bad family reunion, where everyone's plotting to steal the inheritance. The eldest son, Edward the Black Prince, strides into view, his fearsome reputation from battles like Poitiers making you flinch as if his shadow alone could strike. But you know the twist coming, the sad shock that he'll die before claiming the crown, leaving a vacuum that sucks in chaos like a black hole devouring stars. You zoom out for a moment, the castle fading to a speck in the rolling English hills, where peasants huddle in thatched huts against the relentless rain, their lives a poetic echo of the king's grand schemes, fragile as dew on a rose petal, and you ponder how one man's visionary rule could spawn such rival heirs, their ambitions sharpening like knives in the dark. The torchlight mutates now, from warm glow to erratic flicker, mirroring the instability brewing, and you taste the metallic tang again, sharper this time, as if foretelling the blood that will spill from these bold dreams turned nightmares. Suddenly, A gust extinguishes a nearby flame, plunging part of the hall into darkness that feels alive, crawling with unseen threats. And you realize with a chill that this is just the beginning. The suns are watching, waiting, their eyes gleaming like predators in the night, and you question if any throne is worth the cold injustice of what comes next. You huddle in the flickering gloom of Westminster Abbey, the cold stone floor biting through your threadbare shoes like frozen teeth sinking into flesh. And you can't help but question how a kingdom so vast could pin its hopes on a child whose voice still cracks like brittle ice underfoot. The year is 1377, and the air hangs thick with the scent of incense, mingled with the metallic tang of rusting armour. A reminder of battles past that lingers on your tongue sharper than any ale gone sour, as young Richard II, barely 10, stands before the altar, his wide eyes reflecting the unsteady torchlight that dances like mocking sprites across the vaulted ceilings, mutating from the warm glow of his grandfather's triumphs into erratic shadows that whisper of instability to come. You feel the damp wool of your cloak clinging heavier now, sodden from the relentless English rain that seeps through every crack, a sensory burden that mirrors the weight of a crown, too large for such small shoulders. And you grapple with the hollow gaze of this boy king, his face pale as parchment, staring out at the assembled nobles whose murmurs slice through the silence like icy blades against your skin, each word a potential betrayal in this nest of uncles hungry for power. Absurdly, in an age when kings consulted astrologers who read fates in chicken entrails, talk about medieval horoscopes gone wrong, these uncles, Edward III's surviving sons, circle like vultures, their ambitions festering in the damp air, and historians still debate whether Richard's youth was a divine curse or a noble plot waiting to unfold. Some arguing his detachment was innate, others claiming it was forged in the forge of paranoid whispers. You step closer to the throne, your breath visible in the chill that no hearth can banish. Feeling the injustice of a child thrust into rulership hit you like a gut punch, sadder than watching a puppy abandoned in the rain, and you sense the undercurrents of chaos already swirling, as John of Gaunt, the third son with his vast Lancaster estates, eyes the Regency Council with a gaze that could curdle milk, his influence spreading like mould in a forgotten cellar. The torchlight mutates again, its flicker now erratic and accusing, casting elongated shadows that twist the faces of these power-hungry kin into grotesque masks, and you taste the iron on your teeth once more, bitter as the knowledge that this order on the surface Edward III left behind is crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the abbey dissolving into the misty English countryside where peasants toil under the same grey skies. Their lives a lyrical counterpoint to the gilded farce above, fragile threads in a tapestry woven by kings who see them as mere footnotes. And you ponder the shocking element of it all, how one man's deathbed breath could orphan a nation, leaving a boy to navigate a sea of scheming relatives whose loyalty shifts like wind through drafty halls. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this setup feels like a bad reality TV show, worse than Survivor where the prize is a throne and the backstabs are literal, but the empathy wells up in you like a slow ache for Richard, this wide-eyed innocent whose arrogance will bloom from seeds of isolation, detached and paranoid as he grows, exiling rivals and executing kin in fits that make you shiver deeper than the abbey chill. You hear the whispers intensify, uncles plotting in corners where the wet wool scent mixes with the faint rot of ambition, and you feel the psychological chill creep up your spine, a sad realization that this boy king's silent stares hide a storm brewing, one that will drown England in floods of distrust and vengeance. The injustice of it stings like salt in an open wound, a child surrounded by wolves in human form, and you question if any crown is worth the filth of such fractured loyalties, the damp air pressing in like an unwelcome embrace. Suddenly, a draught extinguishes a nearby torch, plunging the nave into deeper shadow that feels alive with unspoken threats, and you sense the mood shifting, the silent stares hardening into something more ominous, leaving you to wonder what fresh hell awaits when these whispers turn to roars. You taste the salt of betrayal sharp on your lips, whipped by the relentless sea spray that stings like 1,000 tiny accusations, as you cling to the slick railing of a creaking ship slicing through foggy shores, questioning how a king's paranoia could banish you, his own cousin, into this watery exile where statistics whisper that half the vessels in these treacherous waters vanish without trace, swallowed by storms fiercer than any royal decree. The year is 1398, and the damp fog envelops you like a shroud, mutating the erratic torchlight from Westminster's shadows into dim, ghostly flickers on the waves, their pale glow barely piercing the murk that smells of brine and despair, a scent that clings to your wet wool cloak heavier than chains, sodden and chafing against your skin, as if the ocean itself is trying to drag you under with its cold, unyielding grasp. You are Henry Bolingbroke, son of John of Gaunt, and your world has shattered like fragile glass under the weight of Richard II's suspicions, his arrogant rule turning detachment into outright tyranny as he exiles you for a perceived slight, seizing your inheritance, the vast Lancaster estates that were your birthright, and leaving you adrift on these foggy shores, your fingers numb from gripping the salt-crusted ropes, the iron taste on your teeth now mingled with the bitterness of seawater, sharper than the injustice of a cousin's force ripping apart the divine veil of kingship that once seemed unbreakable. Absurdly, in an era when sailors navigated by stars hidden behind perpetual clouds and sealed their ships with pitch boiled from pig bones, talk about a greasy last resort, these voyages were gambles worse than betting your life savings on a crypto crash. And historians still argue whether Richard's paranoia was born of genuine fear or a calculated purge to consolidate power, some claiming it was the first crack in the medieval facade of divine right, others insisting it was merely the sad echo of a boy king grown into an isolated tyrant. You feel the deck pitch beneath you, a physical lurch that mirrors the upheaval in your gut, the sensory struggle of nausea rising like bile as the fog thickens, obscuring the English coastline you've left behind, and you grapple with the shocking element of it all, Richard, once your playmate in those draughty halls where uncles schemed, now a king who executes rivals without trial, his detachment blooming into full paranoia that hits sadder than watching a childhood friend succumb to madness. Sarcastically, it's almost laughable how this family drama plays out like a medieval soap opera, worse than a Thanksgiving dinner where your rich uncle cuts you out of the will over a spilled gravy boat. But the empathy surges in you like a wave, for the common folk back home who suffer under Richard's taxes and whims, their loyalties fractured as yours are now, forced to choose sides in a game they never asked to play. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the ship shrinking to a speck on the vast, churning channel, where gulls cry like lost souls above the grey expanse, a lyrical reminder that kingdoms are but fragile constructs on the edge of oblivion. And you ponder the factual twist unfolding Richard's seizure of your lands wasn't just personal spite, but a desperate grab for funds to fuel his lavish court, historians debating if it was fiscal necessity or the hubris of a ruler who believed himself above reproach. The wet wool chafes relentlessly, mutated now into a salty crust that irritates your skin like persistent regrets, and you taste the iron anew, tinged with the brine of exile, as whispers among your fellow exiles reveal plans for return, not in supplication, but in defiance. Your cousin's force having shattered the divine veil so thoroughly that force itself becomes the new right. You spot land ahead through the lifting fog, Brittany's rocky shores emerging like jagged teeth, and the chill creeps deeper into your bones. A psychological shiver at the injustice of it all, banished for defending your honour in a duel that Richard twisted into treason. Sadder still because it echoes the boy king's own vacant stairs from years ago, now hardened into a tyrant's glare. Suddenly, a wave crashes over the bow, drenching you in freezing spray that burns like accusation, and you question if this bitter chill of exile will forge you into a conqueror or drown you in forgotten obscurity. The foggy shores fading behind as resolve hardens in your chest like ice. You cling to the frayed edges of sanity like a man gripping a splintered ledge over an abyss, the damp fog of royal chambers seeping into your bones like unrelenting despair that questions how a king could lose his mind in 1453, the very year England forfeited Bordeaux, its last French stronghold, triggering a breakdown so profound that over a year of silence followed, with statistics whispering that this mental collapse cost the realm more in lost territories than a dozen battles combined. The air in Windsor Castle hangs thick and clammy, wrapping around you like a shroud woven from the mists of the Thames, its chill penetrating your wet wool tunic that's now mutated from mere sodden discomfort into a suffocating second skin. heavy with the residue of endless rains and the faint, acrid scent of unwashed linens that clings to everything, making each breath a laboured effort as if the fog itself is alive, probing your lungs with fingers of icy vapour that taste faintly of the iron on your teeth, now tinged with the bitterness of defeat. Sharper than biting into a rusted nail forgotten in the hay, you stand in the king's privy chamber, the erratic torchlight from earlier exiles now muted into a hazy glow that filters through the fog like sunlight struggling through stained glass, casting elongated shadows that twist across the tapestries depicting faded victories at Agincourt. But here in this moment, the light mutates into something oppressive, illuminating Henry VI's vacant eyes that stare through you as if you're a ghost in his own hallucination. His gentle scholar's face slack and unresponsive, a pious man reduced to a hollow shell where once a warrior's blood flowed. Absurdly, in an age when royal physicians prescribed leech bleedings mixed with herbal concoctions brewed from mandrake roots, talk about a medieval hangover cure gone horribly wrong. Henry's bouts of catatonia baffled even the most learned healers, and historians still debate whether his madness was inherited from his French grandfather Charles VI, who famously thought he was made of glass, or if it was the crushing weight of lost battles that shattered his mind like fragile porcelain under a boot heel. You reach out tentatively, your fingers trembling in the damp air that seeps relentlessly, feeling the sensory struggle as the fog condenses on your skin into beads of cold sweat that trickle down your back like tears unshed. And you grapple with the shocking element of it all, Henry. This soft-spoken king who preferred monasteries to battlefields now drifts in and out of lucidity, his passivity allowing nobles to bicker like crows over carrion, sadder than watching a once vibrant artist fade into oblivion without a single stroke left to paint. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this setup mirrors a corporate boardroom meltdown, worse than a CEO zoning out during a Zoom call that tanks the company stock. But the empathy crashes over you like a wave for Queen Margaret of Anjou, fierce and unyielding, who stands nearby with eyes like daggers, her protective glare burning through the mist as she rallies Lancastrian loyalists to safeguard her son's inheritance. A woman thrust into a man's war where injustice piles upon injustice like layers of fog obscuring the truth. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the chamber blurring into the wider realm where peasants huddle in fog-shrouded hovels, their lives a lyrical lament echoing the king's silence, fragile wisps in a storm that spares no one. And you ponder the factual twist unfolding. Henry's first major episode in 1453 coincides with the birth of his son Edward, yet he doesn't acknowledge the child for months, fueling whispers of illegitimacy that historians argue were either baseless slander or calculated Yorkist propaganda to undermine the throne. The wet wool chafes anew, its heaviness mutated into a clammy prison that irritates every movement, reminding you of the physical event at hand as Richard, Duke of York, steps forward, his capable frame cutting through the mist like a blade, appointed Lord Protector during Henry's stupor, a role that feels like grasping a double-edged sword where one slip could sever alliances forever. You feel the psychological chill deepen, a sad realization that this king's vacant eyes hide not just personal torment but a nation's unraveling, with lands in France slipping away like sand through fingers, trade collapsing under the weight of endless taxes, and nobles fighting openly in the countryside, their skirmishes echoing the injustice of a ruler unfit for the crown he wears. Suddenly, a draught stirs the fog, extinguishing a nearby torch with a hiss that sounds like a sigh of resignation, plunging the room into deeper murk where shadows lengthen like accusations unspoken, and you question if this unrelenting despair will ever lift, or if the damp fog of lost battles will forever seep into the bones of England, leaving only echoes of what might have been. You press on through the haze, your steps echoing hollowly on the stone flags that feel slick underfoot, as if the very floor weeps with the kingdom's sorrow, and the iron taste intensifies, now laced with the acrid bite of gunpowder from distant skirmishes that hint at wars to come. While Margaret's voice cuts through the mist like a clarion call, rallying her supporters with a ferocity that makes you admire her steel spine even as it terrifies, her French accent a reminder of alliances forged in foreign courts where diplomacy dances on the edge of deceit. You circle the king's chair, where he sits unmoving, his hands limp in his lap like forgotten puppets, and the sensory struggle mounts as the fog thickens, blurring your vision until the room feels like a dream-turned-nightmare, where figures loom and recede like phantoms, and you can't shake the shocking truth that this pious man, who once sought solace in scripture rather than steel, now embodies the realm's frailty, his mental lapses allowing York to administer with vision and command, restoring order briefly but igniting rivalries that smoulder like embers under ash. Historians debate if Henry's illness was schizophrenia or a stress-induced catatonia, some pointing to genetic predispositions from his Valois lineage, others to the cumulative trauma of a crown inherited too young. But in this moment, the debate feels irrelevant as you witness the sad spectacle firsthand, empathy flooding you for the queen who births an heir amid this chaos, only for the king to ignore the child, fueling rumours that twist like vines in the fog, sadder than a father forgetting his own flesh and blood. Sarcastically, it's like a plot from a bad fantasy novel, worse than forgetting your password to your own kingdom's Wi-Fi. But the clever commentary hits home this madness isn't just personal. It's political poison, seeping into every crevice of governance, where ministers panic and nobles plot, their grasping hands reaching for power in the vacuum left by a king's absent mind. You lean against a pillar, the cold stone pressing into your back like an unyielding judge, and the wet wool's mutated heaviness now feels like armour too cumbersome to bear, chafing at your resolve as York assumes the protectorate, his decisions bringing fleeting stability but earning Margaret's eternal enmity, her fierce intelligence clashing with his ambition in a dance that promises more fog-shrouded confrontations. The torchlight, once erratic, now steadies slightly under York's command, but its glow reveals cracks in the walls, literal and metaphorical, where injustice festers like mould in the damp, and you ponder the poetic irony of a scholar king whose love for books blinds him to the real world's cruelties, his realm faltering as victories fade and trade collapses, the nation's bones aching with the unrelenting despair of a leader lost in his own mist. Suddenly, a faint cry echoes from the nursery, the prince's wail piercing the fog like a beacon, and you question if this child's birth will awaken the king or deepen the divide. The damp air closing in with a psychological chill that leaves you shivering in anticipation of the storms yet to break. You endure the crushing weight of a borrowed crown pressing down like an invisible anvil on your shoulders, questioning how in 1454 a duke could step into kingship's shadow, while the real monarch's mind wandered lost in fog, with statistics revealing that during Henry VI's year-long silence, England's trade plummeted by nearly a third, merchants fleeing like rats from a sinking ship amid the chaos of a realm without a rudder. The air in the Royal Council chamber at Westminster thickens with the damp chill of impending winter, seeping through the stone walls like insidious whispers from the grave, wrapping around you in a clammy embrace that makes your wet wool tunic feel like a shroud soaked in Thames water, its heaviness mutated from mere discomfort into a suffocating armour that chafes against your ribs with every breath. The scent of mildew and stale rushes assaulting your nostrils like the rot of forgotten ambitions, while the iron taste on your teeth sharpens to a coppery tang, as if you've bitten into a coin forged from the realm's mounting debts that pile higher than the castle battlements. You are Richard, Duke of York, stepping forward as Lord Protector, your fingers numb from gripping the reins of power that aren't truly yours, the erratic torchlight from the king's catatonic episodes now steadying into a harsh glare that illuminates the faces of assembled nobles, their eyes darting like cornered animals in this den of uneasy alliances, where Margaret of Anjou's fierce glare burns through the haze like hidden embers ready to ignite a bonfire, her French poise masking a warrior's resolve that makes you flinch inwardly, as if her stare alone could scorch the flesh from your bones, absurdly. In an era when protectors consulted alchemists who promised to turn lead into gold using bizarre elixirs, brewed from bat wings and mercury talk about a medieval Ponzi scheme gone toxic, these desperate measures reflected the kingdom's fiscal desperation, and historians still argue whether York's appointment was a genuine act of stewardship or a sly power grab disguised as duty, some claiming it saved England from immediate collapse, others insisting it sowed the seeds of deeper division by alienating the Queen's Lancastrian faction. You feel the physical event unfold as you convene the council, your voice echoing off the damp walls that weep condensation like silent tears, ordering reforms to curb court corruption and rally the nobles. But the sensory struggle intensifies as Margaret's presence looms, her perfume of lavender clashing with the musty fog that clings to everything, making your throat tighten as if swallowing shards of glass. Sadder than witnessing a mother's unyielding fight for her son's future in a world that views her ambition as unnatural heresy. Sarcastically, it's almost laughable how this protector role feels like babysitting a comatose CEO while the board plots your ouster. Worse than mediating a family feud over grandma's will where everyone's hiding knives under the table. But the empathy surges in you like a tidal wave for Henry VI, revisited now in his fragile state. A surprising twist revealing that even in madness he occasionally stirs, his vacant eyes flickering with fleeting recognition that tugs at your heartstrings, reminding you of the boy king's earlier innocence shattered by uncle's schemes. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the chamber expanding into the sprawling English landscape where fog blankets the fields like a morning veil. Peasants labouring under the same grey skies that oppress the court, their existence a lyrical lament of endurance amid noble games, fragile as mist dispersing at dawn's first light. And you ponder the factual irony York's bloodline from Lionel of Antwerp gives him a stronger technical claim than Henry's Lancastrian line. Yet assuming the protectorate means walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, where one misstep could plunge the realm back into the abyss, the wet wool's mutated cling now feels like chains forged in the damp forges of uncertainty, chafing your resolve as you issue decrees to restore order, reducing the flatterers who swarm Henry's court like flies on rotting fruit. But Margaret's glare intensifies, her allies reinstated only to be sidelined again when Henry awakens briefly in 1454, his mind returning like a ghost from the ether, remembering nothing of his son's birth or the crisis that gripped the nation, a shocking element that hits sadder than amnesia erasing a father's joy, fueling rumours that swirl like the fog outside, questioning the prince's paternity in hushed tones that echo the injustice of a queen fighting alone in a man's domain. Clever commentary aside, this dance of power feels like a high-stakes poker game where the deck is stacked with jokers, worse than bluffing your way through a job interview with a boss who hates your guts. But the psychological chill deepens as you realise York's brief tenure as protector brings momentary salvation, positioning him as heir apparent while Margaret rallies her forces, her fierce intelligence clashing with your administrative prowess in a standoff that promises more than words, actions that will carve deeper scars into England's already wounded soul. You pace the chamber, the stone floor cold and unyielding underfoot, amplifying the numbness in your fingers that refuse to warm, as nobles switch sides like leaves in the wind, their fractured loyalties a mirror to the kingdom's cracks, and you taste the iron anew, laced with the acrid bite of impending conflict. As Henry's fleeting recovery removes you from power, reinstating Margaret's circle in a move that feels like a slap from fate's icy hand. The torchlight steadies but casts longer shadows now, revealing the hidden embers in Margaret's eyes that smoulder with unquenchable fire, and historians debate if this moment was the true ignition of open war or merely a delay in the inevitable. Some arguing York's exclusion was necessary for Lancastrian survival, others seeing it as the fatal error that turned political manoeuvring into battlefield carnage. You feel the weight pressing harder, the borrowed crown's mantle now a yoke that chafes your neck like rough hemp, mutated from symbol of authority into a burden that saps your strength as you retreat to your northern estates, fingers still numb from the grip of power that slipped away, the damp air outside the chamber closing in like a noose, carrying whispers of armies gathering and rumours flying faster than a raven's on the wing. Suddenly, a gust rattles the shutters, stirring the fog into swirling eddies that obscure the path ahead, leaving you to question if this heavy mantle will crush you or forge you into something unbreakable. The Queen's glare lingering like a brand on your soul amid the unrelenting chill of a kingdom teetering on the brink. You press forward through the swirling mists that now invade the corridors, the dampness seeping deeper into your bones as if the very walls weep for the fractured peace, and the iron taste evolves into a persistent metallic hum that vibrates in your jaw, echoing the clashing ambitions that refuse to quiet. Margaret's influence grows like ivy choking a tree, her rallies drawing Lancastrian nobility whose loyalties harden against you, their whispers turning to open hatred that stings like nettles in the fog, sadder than a family divided by greed where blood ties mean nothing in the face of power's allure. You revisit the boy king's vacant stairs from earlier madness, a surprising twist revealing that his brief lucidity brings not relief but renewed division. His first act stripping you of the protectorate in a move that feels like betrayal from a puppet whose strings are pulled by the Queen's unyielding hand. The sensory struggle mounts as you ride north, the wet wool stiffening in the cold wind that howls like accusing voices, chafing your skin until it reddens with irritation, a physical manifestation of the injustice brewing, where a capable administrator like yourself is sidelined for flatterers who reward loyalty over competence. Their corruption festering like mould in the damp recesses of the court, zooming out once more. The castle recedes into the foggy horizon, a speck amid rolling hills where commoners huddle against the chill, their lives poetic threads frayed by noble games they cannot comprehend, fragile as frost on a rose that melts at dawn's touch. And you ponder the shocking reality that England's faltering under Henry's rule lost lands in France, collapsing trade. Open fights in the countryside demands a strong hand, yet Margaret's determination to preserve her husband's crown for their son Edward of Westminster turns political struggle into something far more visceral, a mother's fierce love clashing with your vision for the realm in a standoff that promises blood. Sarcastically, it's like trying to fix a leaking roof during a hurricane, worse than arguing with a stubborn app that crashes every time you need it most. But the clever commentary fades as empathy for Henry resurfaces, his gentle soul ill-suited for the throne's demands, a sad figure whose piety cannot shield him from the storm, leaving you to endure the mantle's weight alone, fingers numb but resolve hardening like steel in a forge. The torchlight from distant watchtowers flickers through the fog, mutated into beacons of warning that pierce the night, illuminating the path to future clashes where power's grip will be tested not in chambers, but on fields soaked with the damp of dawn and the blood of kin. Suddenly, a raven's caw cuts through the mist, its black form a strange omen against the grey, leaving a psychological chill that settles in your marrow, like the unrelenting despair of a man who knows the borrowed crown's allure is as fleeting as the fog itself, questioning if this heavy burden will elevate you or drag you into the abyss of endless strife. You wade through the churning mud of a rain-lashed field outside St. Albans, the freezing downpour lashing your face like 1,000 icy needles that make you question how in 1455 a single skirmish could erupt into the first open wound of civil war. With statistics murmuring that this clash alone claimed over 50 lives in a brutal melee where forgotten oaths shattered like brittle ice underfoot, alliances crumbling faster than the sodden earth beneath your boots. The year is 1455 and the air hangs heavy with the metallic tang of impending storm, mutated now from the damp fog of royal chambers into a drenching torrent that soaks through your wet wool cloak, turning it into a sodden burden that clings like a lover's desperate embrace gone cold and clammy, chafing your skin raw with every laboured step as the mud sucks at your feet like greedy hands from the grave, the scent of wet earth and horse sweat mingling into a nauseating brew that coats your throat, while the iron taste on your teeth sharpens to a stinging bite. As if you've swallowed shards of the very arrows whistling through the air, you're amid the Yorkist forces led by Richard Duke of York, your boots sinking deeper into the quagmire that turns the once green meadow into a treacherous bog, the erratic torchlight from distant watchfires barely piercing the sheets of rain that blur your vision, their glow mutating into hazy halos that flicker like dying stars against the grey onslaught, illuminating the faces of men whose loyalties waver like reeds in the wind. And you feel the sensory struggle intensify as the cold seeps into your bones, numbness spreading from your fingers gripping a sodden banner that flaps weakly, the injustice of forgotten oaths hitting you like a gut punch as Lancastrian banners loom ahead, their red roses wilting under the deluge yet defiant in the face of this shattering clash. Absurdly, in an age when soldiers patch their armour with boiled leather hardened by urine-soaked hides, talk about a pungent DIY project that reeks worse than a gym locker room, forgotten over summer. These makeshift protections offered little against the hail of arrows that now arc through the freezing rain, and historians still debate whether York's march on St. Albans was a desperate bid for justice or a premeditated coup. Some arguing it was the inevitable explosion of tensions built during Henry's madness. Others claiming it was Margaret's unyielding grip on power that forced his hand. Her fierce glare from earlier council meetings revisited here as a spectral presence fueling the Lancastrian defence. You press forward through the mud, a physical event unfolding as your line collides with the king's supporters, swords clanging in a cacophony that drowns the thunder. The shocking element of it all. The Yorkists outnumbered, yet charging with desperation, sadder than watching old friends turn foes over a throne that devours its claimants. Empathy welling up for the common soldiers caught in this noble squabble. Their oaths to lords now shattered like the alliances that once bound them. Injustice piling upon injustice as rain mixes with blood to create a slick mire where men slip and fall. Their cries lost in the storm's roar. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this battlefield feels like a disastrous group project gone wrong. Worse than a team-building exercise where everyone stabs each other in the back for the corner office. But the clever commentary fades as you dodge an arrow that thuds into the mud beside you. Its cold sting mirroring the betrayal of nobles who switch sides mid-charge. Their fractured loyalties a mirror to the kingdom's cracks that widened during Henry's vacant stairs and York's sidelined protectorate. You zoom out for a poetic breath. The muddy field expanding into the rolling Hertfordshire countryside, where fog lingers like a mourning veil over distant villages. Peasants huddling in thatched hovels as the storm rages. Their lives lyrical threads frayed by the noble games unfolding here, fragile as raindrops shattering on armour, and you ponder the factual irony St Albans wasn't planned as a grand battle, but erupted from a parley gone sour. York's demands for reform met with Lancastrian defiance. Historians debating if the Yorkist victory was due to superior tactics or sheer audacity. Some pointing to the urban fighting in the town streets as a turning point, where arrows rained from rooftops like deadly hail. The wet wool's mutated cling now feels like a prison of ice, stiffening in the freezing rain that numbs your limbs until movement becomes a Herculean effort, chafing your resolve as you witness York's men crush the Lancastrians, capturing Henry himself in a moment of unexpected mercy where the king, fragile and broken, is spared execution. His life preserved not out of kindness but political savvy. A sad twist that revisits his earlier madness with a surprising layer he's forced to wear the crown, while enemies rule in his name. Injustice embodied in a monarch reduced to a puppet. You swing your sword in the fray, the physical clash jarring your arms with each impact, sensory struggle mounting as mud splatters your face, blinding you momentarily in the deluge that turns the field into a quagmire of despair, and the iron taste evolves into a persistent coppery flood that overwhelms your senses, laced with the acrid bite of gunpowder from early handguns that sputter in the rain. Their flashes brief against the grey. The shocking reality hits many Yorkists fight not for glory but survival. Their oaths to York forged in the fires of Margaret's earlier rallies, where she learned to wield power like a blade. Her unyielding determination revisited here as Lancastrian commanders fall, some spared in acts of mercy that surprise even you, like the Duke of Somerset executed in vengeance, but others paroled to sow seeds of future doubt. Sarcastically, this mercy feels like handing a participation trophy to the losing team in a blood sport, worse than forgiving a cheater in Monopoly who bankrupted you last turn. But the empathy crashes over you like the relentless rain. For Henry captured and humiliated, his gentle soul facing the challenge of captivity with quiet resignation, sadder than a fallen idol realizing his piety couldn't shield him from the storm of ambition. You halt amid the aftermath, the muddy fields littered with the fallen, alliances shattered like the oaths sworn under clearer skies, and historians argue if this battle's mercy was strategic genius or naive folly, some seeing it as York's attempt to legitimize his rule, others as the spark that ignited 3 decades of cycle. The torchlight from campfires in the distance pierces the rain, mutated into beacons of uneasy victory that cast long shadows over the slain, illuminating the injustice of a war where cousins slay cousins for a crown that devours all. And you ponder the poetic irony of it all, a brief moment of order in the chaos, fragile as a truce written in water, where York's control promises stability but breeds resentment like weeds in the mud. Suddenly, a gust of wind scatters the rain into swirling eddies that obscure the horizon, leaving a psychological chill that settles in your marrow like the unrelenting despair of a victor who knows mercy today could mean betrayal tomorrow. Questioning if this freezing clash will end the ambitions or merely fan the flames higher, you trudge back through the quagmire, the wet wool stiff and unyielding, chafing your every step as if punishing you for the oaths forgotten in the heat of battle, the iron taste lingering like a curse, and the sensory struggle peaks as numbness gives way to aching fatigue. your body a vessel for the kingdom's woes. The sad element deepens as you glimpse Henry led away, his vacant eyes revisited with a twist of lucidity that flees as quickly as it came, his passivity facing the challenge by retreating into himself, a monarch more ghost than man in this storm of shattered dreams. Clever commentary aside, this clash feels like a bad first date that ends in a food fight. Worse than arguing over the bill with someone who ghosted you afterward. But the empathy for the fallen Lancastrians swells, their loyalties to a weak king costing them everything in a world where justice is as elusive as dry ground in this downpour. You reach the camp, the muddy fields behind you a testament to alliances shattered, the cold sting of arrows echoing in your mind like the injustice of oaths sworn and broken, and the torchlight steadies but its warmth eludes you, mutated into a mocking flicker that highlights the faces of men who wonder if this victory is worth the price. The rain lessens slightly, but the chill remains, a psychological harbinger of storms yet to come, leaving you to question if facing this challenge with mercy will heal the realm or merely delay the inevitable deluge of blood. The strange visual of a fallen banner half buried in mud, its colours bleeding into the earth like forgotten promises, lingers in your vision, a chill mood shift that sets the stage for the heavier weights to come. You sit by the fire, the damp air pressing in, wet wool steaming as it dries too slowly, the iron taste fading but not gone, and you realise the clash wasn't just about ambitions but the human cost. Sadder than any tale told around campfires where survivors recount the horror with trembling voices, the fog rolls in from the fields, mutating the night into a blanket of uncertainty, and you ponder if this freezing rain will wash away the sins or merely water the seeds of further injustice. The sensory struggle eases slightly as warmth from the fire battles the cold, but the numbness in your soul persists, a reminder that facing such challenges requires more than steel. It demands a heart hardened, yet not broken. The torchlight dances, casting shadows that twist like the alliances shattered today, and the psychological chill whispers that mercy might be the rarest commodity in this Game of Thrones. Suddenly, a distant horn sounds through the rain, signalling the uneasy peace of victory, but the mood shifts to wary anticipation, leaving you to wonder what new horrors the dawn will bring in this unending cycle of crown and conflict. You feel the phantom ache of defeat twisting in your gut like a knife left embedded after a back-alley brawl, questioning how in the bitter December of 1460 a duke's severed head could be paraded as a grotesque trophy on York's city walls, crowned with mocking paper in a spectacle that shocked contemporaries and left statistics murmuring of thousands slain in a single afternoon. Their bodies piled like cordwood in the snow, a carnage that made the Battle of Wakefield the bloodiest reminder that Mercian civil war was as rare as sunshine in an English winter. The air whips around you with a wind-whipped silence that carries the sting of frostbite, lashing your face like invisible whips forged from the icy gales of Yorkshire's moors, the damp chill seeping into your bones until every breath feels laboured, heavy with the scent of frozen earth and distant wood smoke that clings to your wet wool cloak, now mutated from a sodden barrier into a frozen carapace that cracks with each movement, chafing your skin raw as if the fabric itself mourns the fallen, while the iron taste on your teeth sharpens to a metallic bite laced with the coppery hint of blood carried on the wind, a sensory echo of the slaughter that unfolded hours ago. You stand atop the ancient walls of York, gazing down at the grim display where Richard Duke of York's head stares sightlessly from its spike, the paper crown askew like a cruel jest, his features frozen in eternal surprise, and you wade through the emotional quagmire of this defeat, the weight pressing on your chest like an invisible anvil as Lancastrian forces celebrate below, their cheers muffled by the wind that howls through the battlements like accusing ghosts, the erratic torchlight from distant campfires mutating into flickering accusations that dance across the severed features, highlighting the injustice that echoes in every gust, sadder than a father's legacy reduced to a macabre warning for all who dared challenge the crown, absurdly, in an era when executioners used axes dulled by overuse and sometimes required multiple swings. Talk about a botched job worse than a barber with shaky hands. The treatment of York's remains wasn't just vengeance, but a deliberate spectacle, and historians still debate whether Queen Margaret ordered the mocking crown as a personal vendetta or a strategic intimidation tactic. some arguing it turned York into a martyr who inspired his sons more than any living rally could. Others claiming it was the Lancastrians' fatal overreach that sowed the seeds of their own downfall. You feel the physical event unfold as you recall the battle's chaos, lured out of Sandal Castle by deceptive Lancastrian promises of parley that weren't worth the parchment they were whispered on. York's forces outnumbered 2-1 in the freezing fields where snow mixed with mud into a treacherous slurry that sucked at boots like greedy graves. The sensory struggle mounting as arrows rained down in volleys that whistled like banshees, your fingers numb from gripping a sword that slipped in the cold, the injustice of it all hitting like a hammer blow York. The capable protector revisited from Henry's mad episodes with a surprising twist of vulnerability, fighting valiantly to the end only to be captured and executed without trial, his pleas for mercy ignored in a rush of bloodlust that promised no quarter. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this ambush feels like falling for a phishing scam in medieval mail, worse than clicking a suspicious link that wipes your entire hard drive, but the empathy crashes over you like a breaking wave for York's sons. Young Edward witnessing his father's fall from afar, the sad element deepened by the knowledge that this defeat wasn't just a loss of life, but a shattering of dreams. The Duke's head displayed as a stark warning that rebellion would be met with cruelty. Yet in a shocking turn, some Lancastrian commanders showed fleeting mercy to lower ranks, sparing foot soldiers who surrendered in the snow. A rare glimmer in the darkness that historians ponder as either pragmatic preservation of manpower or a momentary lapse in the cycle of vengeance. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the city walls receding into the vast Yorkshire landscape, where snow blankets the fields like a shroud over unspoken graves. Peasants huddled in distant hovels hearing tales of the slaughter that drift on the wind like mournful ballads, their lives lyrical threads frayed by noble vendettas they cannot comprehend, fragile as frost patterns on a window that melt at the first touch of dawn. And you ponder the factual irony. Wakefield's Lancastrian victory wasn't the knockout blow Margaret intended, but a hollow triumph that fueled Yorkist fervour, turning Richard into a symbol of endurance where his sons, especially Edward, stepped forward with renewed fire. Historians debating if the battle's brutality accelerated the war's escalation or merely prolonged the inevitable Yorkist resurgence. The wet wool's mutated frieze now cracks audibly as you shift, chafing your neck like a noose tightening in the wind, the numbness in your fingers spreading to your core as if the cold injustice of the display has infected your very soul, and you taste the iron anew, bitter with the acrid bite of gunpowder residue carried from the field where early cannon boomed sporadically in the snow, their flashes brief against the white blanket that turned red in patches like blooming roses in winter. The shocking reality strikes Margaret's role as war leader wasn't just protective but polarizing, some viewing her as a ruthless guardian of her son's rights, others as a foreign interloper driving England to ruin, a sad twist revisiting her earlier rallies during Henry's madness, where she learned to command with an iron fist. Yet here her victory sows division deeper than any defeat, the injustice echoing in the wind-whipped silence as York's head mocks from its perch, a visual that burns into your memory like a brand. Clever commentary aside, this macabre theatre feels like a bad viral prank gone too far, worse than doxing your enemy on social media only to have it backfire spectacularly. But the empathy for the Yorkist remnant swells, their grief facing the challenge by channeling it into vengeance. Young Edward vowing retribution that promises to upend the Lancastrian gains. You descend the walls, the wind howling like a chorus of the damned, carrying the scent of distant pyres where the dead are burned to ash, the sensory struggle peaking as frost nips at your exposed skin, leaving red welts that throb with each gust, and the psychological chill deepens, a realization that this weight of defeat will not crush the Yorkists but temper them like steel in a forge. Questioning if the mocking crown will haunt Margaret's dreams or become the rallying cry that seals her fate. The strange visual of the paper crown fluttering in the wind, tattered and sodden, lingers like a ghost, its injustice amplified by the silence that follows the cheers. A mood shift, a quiet resolve as the snow begins to fall anew, blanketing the horror in pristine white that hides, but does not erase the blood beneath. You trudge through the gates, the wet wool cracking with ice that forms like crystalline accusations, chafing your every step as if punishing you for witnessing this spectacle, the iron taste persistent like a curse that refuses to fade, and the sensory struggle eases only slightly as you seek shelter, but the numbness in your soul remains, a testament to the kingdom's woes where defeat's weight presses on all. The raven from earlier perches nearby, its beady eyes reflecting the torchlight that highlights the city's uneasy peace. And you ponder if facing such injustice with mercy in future battles will heal or merely prolong the agony. The wind-whipped silence envelops you, a psychological harbinger of storms yet to break, leaving you shivering in anticipation of the retribution that brews like thunder on the horizon. The mocking head's eyes seem to follow you, a strange visual that chills to the core, shifting the mood to one of grim determination amid the falling snow. You enter a tavern, the warmth battling the cold, but the wet wool steams with a scent that reminds you of the field's rot, chafing your resolve as whispers of York's sons planning revenge fill the room, the iron taste evolving into a resolve that hardens your jaw. The shocking element resurfaces Clifford's execution of York's young son Rutland. It wasn't vengeance, but barbarity that backfired, sadder than a child's life cut short in the name of old grudges. Historians arguing it galvanized Yorkist support more than any speech. Sarcastically, it's like killing the messenger only to have the message return tenfold. Worse than blocking someone on social media who then creates 10 fake accounts to harass you back. But the empathy for the orphaned Yorkists surges, their grief facing the challenge by forging unbreakable bonds, a surprising twist revisiting Richard's earlier protectorate where mercy was shown, now repaid with cruelty that promises escalation. The poetic zoom-out returns, the tavern fading into the snowy night where stars peek through clouds like watchful eyes. A lyrical vigil over a land scarred by ambition, fragile as the silence before a storm's roar. And you question if this cycle of mocking crowns and severed dreams will ever break, or if England's fate is sealed in blood and ice. The strange visual of the raven taking flight, its wings cutting the wind like a omen, leaves a psychological chill that settles deep, shifting the mood to one of foreboding resolve as the night deepens. You sip mulled wine, the warmth thawing your fingers but not the numbness within, the wet wool drying slowly but the chafing lingering like unresolved grudge, and the iron taste fades slightly, but the injustice echoes on, promising that the wind-whipped silence will soon be shattered by cries of revenge. The mocking head's image haunts your thoughts, a strange visual that chills the soul, setting up a mood of tense anticipation for the battles to come. You retire to a pallet, the damp air pressing in, questioning if facing this weight will forge heroes or more ghosts in the fog. You feel the phantom ache of defeat twisting in your gut like a knife left embedded after a back-alley brawl, questioning how in the bitter December of 1460 a duke's severed head could be paraded as a grotesque trophy on York's city walls, crowned with mocking paper in a spectacle that shocked contemporaries and left statistics murmuring of thousands slain in a single afternoon. Their bodies piled like cordwood in the snow, a carnage that made the Battle of Wakefield the bloodiest reminder that mercy in civil war was as rare as sunshine in an English winter, or that this act of humiliation would backfire spectacularly, turning a fallen leader into a martyr whose legacy ignited a firestorm of vengeance that reshaped the kingdom's fate. The air whips around you with a wind-whipped silence that carries the sting of frostbite, lashing your face like invisible whips forged from the icy gales of Yorkshire's moors. The damp chill seeping into your bones until every breath feels laboured, heavy with the scent of frozen earth and distant wood smoke that clings to your wet wool cloak, now mutated from a sodden barrier into a frozen carapace that cracks with each movement, chafing your skin raw as if the fabric itself mourns the fallen, while the iron taste on your teeth sharpens to a metallic bite laced with the coppery hint of blood carried on the wind, a sensory echo of the slaughter that unfolded hours ago. Sharper than chewing on a rusted nail pulled from the ruins of a battlefield hut, you stand atop the ancient walls of York, gazing down at the grim display where Richard, Duke of York's head stares sightlessly from its spike, the paper crown askew like a cruel jest, his features frozen in eternal surprise amid the swirling snowflakes that settle on his lifeless skin like a mocking veil. And you wade through the emotional quagmire of this defeat, the weight pressing on your chest like an invisible anvil as Lancastrian forces celebrate below. their cheers muffled by the wind that howls through the battlements like accusing ghosts from earlier clashes at St. Albans. The erratic torchlight from distant campfires mutating into flickering accusations that dance across the severed features, highlighting the injustice that echoes in every gust. Sadder than a father's legacy reduced to a macabre warning for all who dared challenge the crown. His eyes once sharp with vision, now dulled in death. A shocking element that hits like a thunderclap in the silence. Absurdly! In an era when heads were preserved with quicklime to delay decay for public display talk about a grisly taxidermy hack that reeks worse than a forgotten fridge full of spoiled meat. These macabre traditions weren't just punishment, but psychological warfare. And historians still debate whether Queen Margaret ordered the mocking crown as a personal vendetta for York's earlier attempts to sideline her during Henry's madness. Some arguing it was a strategic intimidation that backfired by galvanising Yorkist support. Others claiming it was the Lancastrians' fatal hubris that transformed defeat into a rallying cry, revisiting York's protectorate with a surprising twist, where his administrative mercy now contrasted sharply with this brutality. Fueling his son's resolve like oil on a funeral pyre, you feel the physical event unfold as you recall the battle's chaos, lured out of Sandal Castle by deceptive Lancastrian promises of parley that weren't worth the parchment they were whispered on. York's forces outnumbered 2-1 in the freezing fields where snow mixed with mud into a treacherous slurry that sucked at boots like greedy graves. The sensory struggle mounting as arrows rained down in volleys that whistled like banshees through the wind. Your fingers numb from gripping a sword that slipped in the cold. The injustice of it all hitting like a hammer blow York, the capable protector who once showed mercy in St. Albans, now fighting valiantly to the end only to be captured and executed without trial. His pleas ignored in a rush of bloodlust that promised no quarter, sadder than a seasoned commander reduced to begging in the snow. His final moments, a sad echo of the boy king Henry's vacant stairs, where power's fragility was laid bare. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this ambush feels like falling for a phishing scam in medieval mail, worse than clicking a suspicious link that wipes your entire hard drive while you're distracted by holiday cheer. But the empathy crashes over you like a breaking wave for York's young son Rutland, slain in cold blood by Lord Clifford in vengeance for his own father's death at St. Albans. A shocking cycle of retribution that historians ponder as either justified feudal honour or needless barbarity that alienated neutrals. The boy's cries lost in the wind-whipped silence that now envelops the city. A psychological chill deepening as you imagine the grief of his brothers, Edward and the future Richard III facing this weight by channeling it into unyielding determination. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the city walls receding into the vast Yorkshire landscape where snow blankets the fields like a shroud over unspoken graves. Peasants huddled in distant hovels, hearing tales of the slaughter that drift on the wind like mournful ballads from earlier council meetings where uncles schemed, their lives lyrical threads frayed by noble vendettas they cannot comprehend, fragile as snowflakes melting on a warm palm. And you ponder the factual irony Wakefield's Lancastrian victory wasn't the knockout blow Margaret intended, but a hollow triumph that fueled Yorkist fervour, turning Richard into a symbol of endurance where his sons stepped forward with renewed fire. Historians debating if the battle's brutality accelerated the war's escalation or merely prolonged the inevitable Yorkist resurgence. Some pointing to the strategic deception that lured York out as a masterstroke, others as a desperate gamble that cost more than it gained. The wet wool's mutated frieze now cracks audibly as you shift, chafing your neck like a noose tightening in the wind, the numbness in your fingers spreading to your core as if the cold injustice of the display has infected your very soul, and you taste the iron anew, bitter with the acrid bite of gunpowder residue carried from the field where early cannon boomed sporadically in the snow, their flashes brief against the white blanket that turned red in patches like blooming roses in winter, a visual that burns into your memory like a brand on livestock. The shocking reality strikes Margaret's role as war leader wasn't just protective but polarizing, some viewing her as a ruthless guardian of her son's rights who learned from Henry's madness to wield power without hesitation, others as a foreign interloper driving England to ruin. A sad twist revisiting her earlier rallies during the King's Catatonia, where she forged alliances that now bear fruit in this victory. Yet the injustice echoes in the wind-whipped silence as York's head mocks from its perch. a grotesque symbol that promises to haunt the Lancastrians as much as it terrifies the Yorkists. Clever commentary aside, this macabre theatre feels like a bad viral prank gone too far, worse than posting a deep fake video that ruins reputations overnight. But the empathy for the Yorkist remnants swells, their grief facing the challenge by channeling it into vengeance. Young Edward vowing retribution that promises to upend the Lancastrian gains at Towton and beyond. A surprising turn where mercy shown to some captured Yorkists by Lancastrian commanders sows seeds of doubt among the victors. You descend the walls, the wind howling like a chorus of the damned, carrying the scent of distant pyres where the dead are burnt to ash rather than buried in frozen ground. The sensory struggle peaking as frost nips at your exposed skin, leaving red welts that throb with each gust like pulses of unresolved anger. And the psychological chill deepens, a realization that this weight of defeat will not crush the Yorkists, but temper them like steel in a forge, questioning if the mocking crown will end the ambitions or fan the flames higher. The strange visual of the paper crown fluttering in the wind, tattered and sodden, lingers like a ghost in the night, shifting the mood to one of grim determination as the snow continues to fall, blanketing the horror in pristine white that hides but does not erase the blood beneath. You trudge through the gates, the wet wool cracking with ice that forms like crystalline accusations, chafing your every step as if punishing you for witnessing this spectacle. The iron taste persistent like a curse that refuses to fade, and the sensory struggle eases only slightly as you seek shelter in a nearby tavern. But the numbness in your soul remains, a testament to the kingdom's woes where defeat's weight presses on all who survived. The raven from earlier perches on a windowsill, its beady eyes reflecting the torchlight that highlights the patrons' faces. Whispered tales of York's sons planning revenge filling the room like smoke from the hearth. The shocking element resurfacing Clifford's execution of Rutland wasn't vengeance but barbarity that backfired, sadder than a child's life cut short in the name of old grudges from St Albans. Historians arguing it galvanised Yorkist support more than any speech, a twist that revisits the Protectorate's mercy with bitter irony. Sarcastically, it's like killing the messenger only to have the message return tenfold in the form of an army, worse than blocking a cheater on social media who then creates 10 fake accounts to harass you back. But the empathy for the orphaned Yorkists surges, their grief facing the challenge by forging unbreakable bonds among brothers, a surprising development where Edward, the eldest, emerges as a charismatic leader whose youth belies a strategic mind honed by loss. The poetic zoom-out returns, the tavern fading into the snowy night where stars peek through clouds like watchful eyes over the scarred land, a lyrical vigil that promises renewal amid ruin, fragile as the silence before a storm's roar, and you ponder if this cycle of mocking crowns and severed dreams will ever break, or if England's fate is sealed in blood and ice. The strange visual of the raven taking flight, its wings cutting the wind like an omen of doom, leaving a psychological chill that settles deep, shifting the mood to one of foreboding resolve as the night deepens into an uneasy hush. You sip mulled wine by the fire, the warmth thawing your fingers but not the numbness within, the wet wool steaming with a scent that reminds you of the field's rot mingled with snow, chafing your resolve as whispers grow of Edward's march south, the iron taste evolving into a resolve that hardens your jaw like the frozen ground outside. The shocking aftermath unfolds in tales of Lancastrian commanders like Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, whose ruthless orders at Wakefield weren't born of hatred alone but a desperate bid to end the Yorkist threat. Yet the sad element deepens as you learn of York's final plea for his life, ignored in the heat of victory, injustice echoing like the wind through the tavern's cracks. Clever commentary aside, this display feels like a medieval version of cancel culture gone lethal, worse than doxing your rival only to have their supporters swarm you online. But the empathy for Margaret swells unexpectedly. Her role as protector facing the challenge by embracing the brutality she once decried during Henry's madness, a twist that humanizes her as a mother fighting for her son's future in a world that affords women no mercy. The torchlight dances on the walls, mutated into warm flickers that contrast the outer cold, highlighting faces etched with fear and hope. And you question if this weight will lift or crush all beneath it. The strange visual of snow drifting past the window like silent witnesses to the severed dreams below. A mood shift to contemplative silence as the fire crackles, promising that the injustice will not go unanswered. You retire to a pallet upstairs, the damp air pressing in even here, questioning if facing this defeat with mercy in the Yorkists' hearts will turn the tide or merely prolong the agony of a nation bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. The Ravenscore fades into the night, a psychological chill lingering like the wind-whipped silence that blankets the city, setting up a mood of tense anticipation for the revenge that brews like a storm on the horizon. You stumble through crimson snowdrifts that crunch under your boots like brittle bones snapping in the frost, questioning how in the freezing spring of 1461 a single battle could claim over 28,000 lives, more than any clash on English soil before or since, turning a Yorkshire meadow into a slaughterhouse where the snow ran red with blood. Statistics that whisper of arrows falling like deadly hail, and men hacking at each other until the rivers nearby were said to flow scarlet for days. The carnage so vast it makes you wonder if the land itself wept in horror at the nation's fractured soul. The air bites with a savage cold that pierces your lungs like shards of glass inhaled with every ragged breath. The wind howling across the open fields near Towton village with a ferocity that whips snowflakes into your eyes, blinding you momentarily as they melt into icy tears streaking down your face, the damp chill seeping relentlessly into your bones until your fingers ache with numbness, clutching a longbow that's slick with frost and blood, its string taut like a predator's sinew ready to snap. While your wet wool cloak, mutated from a sodden shield into a frozen shroud that cracks with each step, chafes against your raw skin like sandpaper soaked in brine. The scent of wet iron and churned earth assaulting your nostrils in waves that mix with the acrid tang of gunpowder from scattered hand-guns, making the iron taste on your teeth evolve into a nauseating coppery flood that overwhelms your senses, sharper than biting into a frozen apple laced with rust from neglected armour. You are amid the Yorkist ranks under young Edward, Earl of March, now stepping into his father's bloody legacy after Wakefield's mocking crown spectacle, your boots sinking into the snowy slurry that turns the battlefield into a treacherous quagmire where footing betrays you at every turn, the erratic torchlight from pre-dawn signals mutating into hazy beacons through the blizzard that rages on Palm Sunday, illuminating the Lancastrian lines on the higher ridge where Queen Margaret's forces hold the advantage, their banners flapping defiantly in the gale that carries the distant hum of longbows being drawn, a sound that vibrates through your chest like the low growl of an approaching beast, and you feel the sensory struggle peak as the wind shifts, carrying your arrows farther while theirs falter against the blast, a factual twist historians debate as divine intervention or mere meteorological luck, some arguing the storm was the true kingmaker that day, turning the tide in Yorkist favour amid the chaos where men slipped and fell into the muddied snow, their cries lost in the whirlwind. Absurdly, in an era when archers protected their bowstrings with wax made from beeswax and sheep fat, talk about a sticky solution that smells worse than a medieval gym sock left to ferment these weapons of terror. Capable of piercing plate armour at 200 yards, unleashed volleys that darkened the skies like a plague of locusts, and you grapple with the physical event as the lines clash in hand-to-hand fury, your sword swinging in arcs that jar your arms with bone-shaking impacts. The shocking element of it all, Edward's youthful charisma rallying men through the storm, his mounted figure cutting through the fray like a avenging spectre, sadder than watching brothers in arms turn on each other over faded loyalties, empathy surging for the Lancastrian foot soldiers who break ranks and flee only to be hunted down in the pursuit, their screams echoing the injustice of a war where common men pay the price for noble ambitions. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this melee feels like a Black Friday stampede gone lethal, worse than elbowing through crowds for a discounted TV only to end up trampled for nothing. But the clever commentary fades as you dodge a poleaxe swing that whistles past your ear, the wind aiding Yorkist momentum while exhaustion claims the Lancastrians, their higher ground lost in the blizzard's fury that mutates the field into a white hell streaked with red. Historians still arguing whether Towton's scale up to 80,000 men engaged marked the peak of medieval warfare's brutality, or the dawn of more tactical evolutions, some pointing to the longbow's devastating role as a precursor to gunpowder dominance, others to Edward's leadership that revisited his father's martyrdom at Wakefield with a surprising twist of vengeance fulfilled, turning grief into unbreakable resolve. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the bloody fields expanding into the vast Yorkshire expanse where snow swirls like ethereal spirits mourning the dead. Peasants in distant hamlets hearing the distant roar like thunder from hell. Their lives' lyrical threads snapped by the storm of the war, fragile as snowflakes crushed under boot heels, and you ponder the factual irony this battle, fought on a holy day, wasn't just about crowns but visions of England's future, Yorkist strength clashing with Lancastrian legitimacy in a melee that spilled over miles. Men-at-arms wielding axes and bills in close quarters where armour dented like tin cans under sledgehammers. The injustice amplified as Lancastrian nobles like the Duke of Somerset fall in the crush, their bodies trampled into the mud that now sucks at your boots like reluctant graves. The wet wool's mutated frieze clings tighter, chafing your thighs with icy friction that burns like fire, the numbness in your limbs battling the adrenaline that courses through you like liquid flame, and you taste the iron anew, bitter with the acrid bite of sweat and fear that drips from your brow into your mouth, a sensory reminder of the human cost as horses scream in agony, their hooves churning the snow into pink slush that splatters your face. The shocking reality striking many fight not for glory but survival, conscripted from villages where famine stalks like a shadow, sadder than families torn apart by calls to arms they never understood. Clever commentary aside, this snowy slaughter feels like nature conspiring against humanity, worse than a snowball fight escalating into Armageddon with real stakes. But the empathy for Edward swells as he rides the lines, his voice cutting through the gale with stirring words that rally the flagging, facing the challenge with a fearlessness that belies his youth, a surprising twist revisiting Black Prince's legacy, where valour runs in the blood. Yet here it's tempered by the cold calculation needed to seize a throne. The torchlight from scattered fires mutates into smoky beacons that pierce the blizzard, casting eerie glows on the fallen whose armour gleams dully under fresh snow. Historians debating if the wind shift was meteorological luck or York's tactical genius in positioning archers, some arguing it foreshadowed the decline of chivalric warfare, others seeing it as the brutal pinnacle where morale broke like ice under pressure. You swing your weapon again, the jar reverberating up your arm like a tolling bell for the dead, the sensory struggle overwhelming as exhaustion sets in, limbs heavy as lead while the cold gnaws deeper, chafing your spirit as much as your flesh, and the psychological chill deepens with the realization that this victory tilts the war but doesn't end it. Margaret fleeing into exile with her son, her unyielding glare revisited now as a promise of return, the injustice of orphaned children and widowed queens fueling cycles that seem endless. The strange visual of a broken longbow half buried in the snow, its string snapped like a lifeline severed, lingers amid the carnage, a mood shift to weary triumph as the storm abates slightly, leaving you to question if stumbling through these crimson snowdrifts will mend the nation's fractured soul, or merely paint it redder still. You collapse against a fallen log, the wet wool steaming faintly in the dying wind, chafing less now, but the ache persistent, the iron taste fading to a dull throb as survivors gather, whispers of Edward's proclamation as king echoing like a fragile hope. The shocking aftermath unfolding with bodies stripped for loot in the snow, sadder than the waste of lives for a crown that offers no warmth against the cold. Sarcastically, it's like winning a lottery only to find the prize is a pile of frozen debts, worse than claiming a throne that's booby-trapped with endless enemies. But the empathy for the Lancastrian heir Prince Edward surges, facing exile with his mother in a twist that humanizes their flight. Historians arguing if Towton-scale accelerated Yorkist dominance or prolonged the agony by leaving Margaret alive to plot. The poetic zoom-out returns, the fields fading into the horizon where snow settles like a blanket over unspoken horrors. A lyrical hush falling as night deepens, fragile as the peace that teeters on Edward's young shoulders, and you ponder if this hum of longbows in memory will silence the pain or amplify it in echoes yet to come. The strange visual of a lone horse wandering the drifts, its saddle empty and blood-stained, chills your core, shifting the mood to contemplative exhaustion as the stars emerge through thinning clouds, promising a dawn that might bring clarity or more storm. You rise slowly, the wet wool easing its grip as the cold numbs further, chafing your determination to press on, the iron taste a constant companion like the war itself, and the sensory struggle subsides into a weary ache that mirrors the nation's weary heart. The torchlight dims as fires gutter in the wind, mutated into embers that glow like dying eyes, watching over the fractured soul that longs for mending. Suddenly, a distant horn sounds through the settling snow, a call to regroup that shifts the mood to tentative resolve, leaving you to question if this pain will forge unity or fracture it further in the bloody fields ahead. You navigate the gilded halls of Westminster Palace, thick with the cloying scent of roasted meats and spiced wine that masks the sharp pang of shifting shadows. Questioning how, in the opulent spring of 1464, a king's secret marriage could ignite a courtly firestorm deadlier than any battlefield. With statistics murmuring that Edward IV's union to a commoner widow splintered alliances faster than a shattered goblet at a feast, alienating nobles who had bled for his crown, and setting the stage for betrayals that echo the Wars of the Roses' endless cycle of envy and ambition. The air hangs heavy with the perfume of lavender and myrrh from ornate tapestries, but beneath it lurks the faint rot of overripe fruits left too long on silver platters, seeping into your nostrils like a deceptive embrace that turns sour, making each breath a laboured indulgence as the damp warmth of crowded bodies presses in. Your wet wool tunic mutated now from battlefield soddenness into a sweat-soaked garment that clings like a lover's jealousy, too tight to escape chafing your skin with every graceful bow you make to passing courtiers, their silks rustling like whispers of conspiracy, while the iron taste on your teeth evolves into a cloying sweetness laced with bile, as if you've sipped from a poisoned chalice disguised as honeyed mead, sharper than the envy that simmers in every glance exchanged across the lavish chamber, where torchlight dances merrily on golden goblets, its erratic flicker mutating from the snowy beacons of Towton into warm, deceptive glows that hide the daggers in smiling eyes. You're a courtier in Edward IV's inner circle, weaving through the throng at a grand banquet celebrating his coronation, your fingers numb from gripping a jewelled cup that slips slightly in the humid air, the physical event unfolding as minstrels strum lutes in the background, their melodies masking the undercurrents of discontent that ripple like hidden currents beneath a serene river, and you feel the sensory struggle intensify as the cloying scent overwhelms, turning festive aromas into a nauseating fog that coats your throat, sadder than watching a young king, fresh from Towton's crimson victory, squander his hard-won unity on a marriage born of passion rather than politics. His bride, Elizabeth Woodville, a widow with 2 sons and no noble blood, stepping into the light with a grace that belies the storm she unleashes. Her commoner status a shocking element that hits like thunder in a clear sky, alienating the Earl of Warwick, the kingmaker who engineered Edward's rise. His fierce loyalty fracturing like glass under the weight of this insult. Absurdly, in an era when royal marriages were sealed with dowries including entire counties or foreign alliances, talk about a prenup that could buy a small country. These unions were less about love and more about land grabs, and historians still debate whether Edward's clandestine wedding at Grafton Regis was a romantic impulse or a calculated snub to Warwick's plans for a French match. Some arguing it was the spark that ignited Yorkist internal divisions, others claiming it exposed the fragility of alliances forged in blood but sustained by self-interest. You bow low as Warwick passes, his face a mask of controlled fury, the sharp pang of his envy piercing the air like an unspoken accusation, and you grapple with the injustice of it all, a king rewarding loyalty with titles yet favouring his new queen's relatives, the Woodvilles rising like weeds in a garden once tended by Warwick's hand, sadder than seeing a mentor betrayed by the pupil he elevated, empathy welling up for Warwick whose kingmaker moniker now tastes bitter on his tongue, revisited from Edward's Towton triumph with a surprising twist where gratitude sours into resentment faster than wine turning to vinegar in the heat. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this courtly drama unfolds like a reality TV wedding special gone wrong. Worse than a bachelor choosing the wildcard contestant over the fan favourite and watching the ratings tank. But the clever commentary fades as you overhear whispers of Warwick's growing disillusionment, his influence waning as Edward lavishes favours on the Woodvilles, promoting them to high offices and marrying them into noble houses. A shocking power grab that alienates old allies and sows seeds of treachery in these gilded halls, where envy festers like mould behind the tapestries. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the banquet hall expanding into the sprawling Thameside landscape, where fog lingers over the river like unspoken regrets. Merchants in distant wharves tallying profits from renewed trade, their lives lyrical threads woven into the court's opulence, fragile as the candle flames that gutter in the draughty corridors, and you ponder the factual irony Edward's reign, initially marked by stability after Towton's bloodbath, now fractures under personal choices, historians debating if his marriage to Elizabeth was a genuine love match that humanized the king, or a reckless indulgence that undermined his Yorkist base, some pointing to the secret ceremony attended by only a handful as evidence of impulsivity, others seeing it as a deliberate assertion of royal prerogative over noble counsel. The wet wool's mutated cling now steams in the heated hall, chafing your neck with sweaty friction that irritates like persistent doubts, the numbness in your fingers giving way to a prickling heat as you circulate among the guests, the cloying scent intensifying with each toast raised to the king's health, and you taste the iron anew, bitter with the acrid bite of intrigue that sours the wine, a sensory reminder of the human cost as Warwick's glare meets Edward's across the room, their once unbreakable bond cracking like ice under spring thaw. The shocking reality strikes Warwick. The architect of Edward's throne now feels sidelined, his French alliance plans dashed by this Woodville upstart, sadder than a master craftsman watching his creation turned against him. The injustice amplified as Elizabeth's brothers and sisters flood the court with their ambitions, marrying into power and displacing old Yorkist loyalists who bled at Towton, their loyalty rewarded with neglect. Clever commentary aside, this lavish excess feels like a corporate merger party, where the CEO marries the intern and promotes her family over the board, worse than watching stock prices plummet while champagne flows. But the empathy for Edward surges unexpectedly, a young king reveling in his conquest both martial and romantic, facing the challenge by indulging his desires in a world that demands calculation over passion. A surprising twist revisiting his father's martyrdom at Wakefield, where ambition clashed with duty, now echoed in Edward's court where envy hides behind smiles. The torchlight dances on jewelled necks and golden plates, mutated into warm illusions that conceal the sharp pang of betrayal brewing, historians arguing if Warwick's resentment stemmed from personal slight or broader fears of Woodville dominance that threatened the Yorkist coalition. Some seeing his switch to Lancastrian support as inevitable, others as a tragic overreaction to a king's folly. You sip from your cup, the wine's sweetness cloying on your tongue like false flattery, the sensory struggle shifting from cold numbness to overheated flush as bodies press in the crowded hall, chafing your composure amid the whispers that grow bolder, the injustice of shifting shadows where old friends become rivals over a queen's favour, sadder than alliances forged in blood dissolving in the wine of jealousy. The poetic zoom-out returns, the hall fading into the night-shrouded Thames where barges glide like silent spectres, a lyrical hush over the city that masks the undercurrents of discontent, fragile as the trust between king and kingmaker that frays like old silk, and you ponder if this gilded treachery will mend or unravel the realm further. The strange visual of a dropped goblet rolling across the floor, its wine spilling like blood on marble, lingers amid the laughter, a psychological chill settling as Warwick excuses himself early, his departure shifting the mood to uneasy merriment that hints at storms brewing beyond the lavish facade. You circulate once more, the wet wool drying in the heat, but leaving a sticky residue that chafes your arms like nagging doubts, the iron taste persisting as a reminder of battles past, and the sensory struggle evolves into a dizzying whirl of scents and sounds that overwhelm, questioning if navigating these halls will reveal more treachery or forge unlikely reconciliations. The torchlight wanes slightly as candles gutter, mutated into dimmer glows that accentuate the shadows where envy lurks, and the shocking whisper reaches your ear. Warwick plotting with Clarence, Edward's own brother, a sad betrayal that echoes the family fractures of old. Historians debate if this sibling rift was born of greed or manipulation, some arguing Clarence's ambition was his downfall, others seeing Warwick's influence as the catalyst that turned courtly envy into open rebellion. Sarcastically, it's like a family business where the siblings fight over dad's legacy while the company burns, worse than a boardroom coup plotted over coffee that's gone cold. But the empathy for Elizabeth swells, a commoner queen facing noble scorn in a world that resents her rise, facing the challenge with quiet dignity that belies her inner strength. A surprising twist revisiting Margaret's earlier ferocity, where women wield power in the shadows. The cloying scent of feasts now turns overpowering, chafing your senses like the treachery it hides. The iron taste a constant undercurrent, and the psychological chill deepens with the realization that lavish courts are but veils for the sharp pang of human frailty. The strange visual of a flickering candle reflecting in a courtier's eyes, hiding unshed tears of resentment, leaves a mood shift to tense anticipation as the night wears on, questioning if this envy will consume the court or be quenched before it ignites anew. You retire to a side chamber, the wet wool easing its grip in the quieter air, but the chafing lingers like unresolved tensions, the iron taste fading to a dull ache as sleep eludes you amid the whispers that echo through the halls. The torchlight outside dims, mutated into faint glimmers that barely hold back the darkness, and the sensory struggle subsides into a weary haze that mirrors the court's fragile facade. Suddenly, a distant laugh cuts through the night, shifting the mood to one of false calm that promises more shadows to navigate in the days ahead. You peer into the echoing stone chambers of the Tower of London, the musty air heavy with unspoken fears and lingering doubts that make you question how in the sweltering summer of 1483, two young princes could vanish without a trace, leaving behind statistics that whisper of a mystery unsolved for over 5 centuries, with bones discovered in 1674 beneath a staircase, fueling debates on whether they were the boys' remains or mere red herrings in a tale of royal intrigue darker than any dungeon's depths. The air clings to you like a shroud spun from centuries of secrets, thick and oppressive with the scent of damp limestone and ancient dust that settles in your lungs like forgotten ash, making each breath a laboured gasp as if the walls themselves exhale the weight of history's unresolved sins. Your wet wool tunic mutated now from the lavish court's sweaty cling into a musty garment, soaked with the tower's perpetual humidity that drips from the ceilings like slow tears chafing your arms with a sticky friction that irritates like persistent whispers in the dark. The iron taste on your teeth evolving into a stale, chalky residue laced with the faint bitterness of lime mortar crumbling from the stones, sharper than chewing on a forgotten key rusted by time's neglect, while the torchlight from narrow slits mutates from the warm deceptive glows of Edward's banquets into dim, wavering flames that cast elongated shadows across the vaulted ceilings, flickering like the uncertain fates of those imprisoned here, illuminating graffiti scratched by long-gone captives whose pleas echo in your mind like ghosts refusing to rest. You are a silent watcher in the White Tower's depths, your fingers pressing against the cold iron bars of a cell window that overlook the Thames' murky flow, the physical event unfolding as you imagine the princes Edward Fee, barely 12, and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, being led through these corridors by their uncle's guards, their small footsteps echoing off the stones in a rhythm that quickens your pulse, the sensory struggle intensifying as the musty air thickens with the imagined cries of children separated from their mother, Elizabeth Woodville, who sought sanctuary in Westminster Abbey only to be coerced into releasing her youngest son, a shocking element that hits sadder than a parent watching their child vanish into the night without a farewell. Empathy flooding you for these boys thrust into a game of thrones they were too young to play, their royal blood a curse rather than a blessing in this den of unspoken fears where doubt lingers like the fog rolling off the river outside. Absurdly, in an era when royal prisons offered luxuries like straw mattresses infested with fleas and meals of bread soaked in waterdale, talk about a 5-star dungeon experience that's worse than economy class on a red-eye flight. These princes were lodged in the tower not as prisoners at first, but as guests awaiting coronation. And historians still debate whether Richard III ordered their murder to secure his throne, or if they were spirited away to safety. Some arguing the bones found later were planted evidence. Others insisting Tudor propaganda painted Richard as a villain to legitimize Henry VII's conquest. A factual twist revisiting Edward III's lavish court, with a surprising layer of tragedy, where his sudden death from illness, perhaps pneumonia or even poison. Debate's rage left his sons vulnerable to their uncle's ambitions. The injustice amplified as Richard declares them illegitimate, based on claims of their parents' invalid marriage, a legal maneuver that strips them of the crown faster than a thief in the night. You descend a spiral staircase into deeper chambers, the stones slick underfoot from condensation that pools like unshed tears. your wet wool tunic steaming faintly in the confined space that feels like descending into a tomb alive with echoes, chafing your elbows against the narrow walls that seem to close in with every turn, the musty air growing denser until it coats your throat like velvet dust, and you taste the iron anew, bitter with the acrid bite of fear sweat imagined from the prince's last days. A sensory reminder of their isolation, where games of chess and lessons in Latin gave way to the creeping dread of vanishing footsteps in the night. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how this royal protection feels like locking kids in a basement during a family feud, worse than grounding your siblings for life over who gets dad's favourite chair. But the clever commentary dissolves as you envision young Edward V revisited from his father's opulent banquets, with a sad twist heir to a throne that devours its own, facing the challenge by clinging to boyish hope amid the tower's silent whispers that promise no escape, his brother's smaller hand in his a fragile bond against the lingering doubts that plague their fate. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the chambers expanding into the sprawling tower complex where ravens croak like ominous heralds on the green, a lyrical vigil over the Thames that flows indifferently past, carrying secrets downstream like leaves in autumn's current, fragile as the trust between uncles and nephews shattered by ambition's blade. And you ponder the shocking reality Richard's assumption of the throne via titulus regius, annulling Edward III's marriage on grounds of pre-contract with another woman, a legal fiction that historians debate as either genuine scandal or fabricated smear, some seeing it as Richard's desperate bid for legitimacy amid Yorkist divisions, others as the culmination of Woodville envy that festered since Elizabeth's rise, the injustice echoing in the empty chambers where the prince's laughter once rang, now silent as graves. The torchlight wanes in the depths, mutated into feeble glimmers that barely hold back the encroaching dark, casting spectral shapes on the walls where chains rattle faintly in the draught, and the musty air presses heavier, chafing your senses with its unrelenting staleness that makes you cough softly, the iron taste persisting like a curse whispered by the stones themselves. The strange visual of a child's forgotten toy, a wooden horse half buried in straw, lingers in the corner, a psychological chill settling as you imagine their final nights, doubts multiplying like shadows at dusk, questioning if they sensed the unspoken fears closing in. You ascend slowly, the stairs winding like a serpent's coil, the wet wool drying in the upper air but leaving a musty residue that chafes your neck like nagging suspicions. The sensory struggle easing into a dull throb that mirrors the realm's unease under Richard's rule, where propaganda brands him tyrant while supporters hail him reformer, historians arguing his short reign's policies like legal aids for the poor were progressive yet overshadowed by the prince's fate. A sad element that humanizes a king vilified by Tudor chroniclers who painted him hunchbacked and villainous to justify their conquest. Sarcastically, it's like accusing your boss of stealing office supplies to cover your own embezzlement scheme, worse than a corporate smear campaign that backfires when the truth leaks. But the empathy for Richard surges in a twist to he too a product of the wars, facing the challenge by consolidating power amid whispers of illegitimacy, his northern support strong but southern doubts lingering like the tower's fog. The musty air thins as you emerge into the courtyard, but the unspoken fears follow like ghosts, the iron taste fading to a lingering bitterness that questions the truth buried with the boys. The shocking discovery of bones centuries later, analysed in 1933 but never DNA tested until recent calls, fuels ongoing debates, some insisting they belong to the princes murdered by Richard's orders, others theorising survival in obscurity or even Tudor foul play to eliminate threats, the injustice amplified by Shakespeare's dramatisation that cements Richard as crook-backed monster, sadder than history's victors rewriting the vanquished's tale. You pause by the Traitor's Gate, the Thames lapping darkly below, a poetic murmur of time's inexorable flow that carries away doubts yet leaves fears etched in stone, fragile as the silence that enveloped the prince's vanishing, and you ponder if this mystery will ever be resolved or if the tower's whispers are destined to echo eternally. The strange visual of moonlight glinting on the river like scattered coins of forgotten ransom lingers, a psychological chill deepening as the night settles, shifting the mood to one of haunting ambiguity, where lingering doubts refuse to dissipate like mist at dawn. You turn away, the wet wool easing its musty grip in the open air, chafing less but the unease persistent, The iron taste a faint echo as you contemplate the realm's fractured soul, questioning if peering into these chambers reveals more truth or merely multiplies the shadows. The torchlight from a guard's lantern mutates into a solitary beam cutting the dark, illuminating ravens that hop like sentinels of secrets, and the sensory struggle subsides into a contemplative hush that mirrors the historical void left by the prince's fate. Suddenly, a raven's croak pierces the night, shifting the mood to eerie anticipation for the usurper's rise that follows this vanishing act. You walk the battlements, the musty air following like a faithful spectre, the chafing of wool forgotten amid the weight of unspoken history, and the iron taste lingers as a reminder that some doubts are buried too deep to exhume. The shocking persistence of the mystery modern DNA proposals rejected by the Crown fuels endless speculation, sadder than lost children whose story became legend rather than legacy. Historians arguing if Richard's guilt is fact or fiction, crafted by victors like Henry VII to legitimize his throne. Sarcastically, it's like a cold case file that's been shelved for centuries, worse than an unsolved true crime podcast that leaves listeners hanging on every episode. But the empathy for the boys surges, innocent pawns in a game of crowns, facing the challenge by vanishing into myth where their fears echo eternally in the tower's stones. The poetic reflection deepens. The rivers flow a lyrical dirge for the unspoken, fragile as the trust that's shattered with their disappearance, and you question if this lingering doubt will ever fade or if it's woven into England's very fabric. The strange visual of moonlight on empty windows, like eyes staring into nothingness, leaves a chill that settles deep, shifting the mood to one of melancholy resolve as the night wears on. You clutch a throne slick with suspicion, your fingers sliding over the polished oak armrests that feel greased with the oil of deceit and whispered accusations, questioning how in the stifling heat of July 1483 a duke could declare himself king while the echoes of vanished princes haunted the corridors. With statistics murmuring that Richard III's coronation drew crowds more out of fear than fervour, his reign shadowed by rumours that poisoned the air like arsenic in a chalice, a mystery where over 500 years later DNA tests on unearthed bones still fuel debates on whether the boys were smothered in their sleep or spirited away to obscurity, leaving England's soul fractured by the injustice of heirs erased to secure a crown that devoured its own bloodline. The air in the royal apartments at Westminster Palace hangs thick and stagnant, heavy with the scent of beeswax from flickering candles and the faint musty rot of tapestries woven with scenes of chivalric glory now faded like forgotten vows, seeping into your nostrils like a deceptive fog that turns cloying in the summer humidity, making each breath a laboured draw as if the walls exhale the weight of unresolved sins from the tower's depths. Your wet wool tunic mutated now from the musty cling of those stone chambers into a sweat-drenched garment that sticks to your skin like a layer of guilt you can't peel away, chafing your back with sticky friction that irritates like the persistent itch of doubt gnawing at your mind. The iron taste on your teeth evolving into a greasy film laced with the bitterness of bile rising from your stomach, sharper than swallowing a key to a locked chest of secrets that refuses to open. While the torchlight from ornate sconces mutates from the dim glimmers of the prince's cell into harsh, golden beams that cast elongated shadows across the throne room, flickering like the unsteady loyalty of nobles who bow before you, but whisper treachery in alcoves where suspicion breeds like mould in the damp crevices of ancient stone. You are Richard III, newly crowned in a ceremony laden with pomp, yet poisoned by the absence of your nephews, your fingers gripping the sceptre that feels unnaturally heavy, as if weighted by the ghosts of Edward V and young Richard, their vanishing a physical event that unfolded in the tower's silent nights, where guards turned blind eyes and muffled cries echoed unheard, the sensory struggle intensifying as the summer heat presses in like an interrogator's breath, making sweat bead on your brow and mix with the imagined chill of empty corridors that amplify every footstep into a potential assassin's tread. Sadder than an uncle-turned-guardian who faces the challenge by erasing threats to his grasp, empathy surging for the boys whose innocence was sacrificed on ambition's altar, a shocking element that hits like lightning in a clear sky, their declared illegitimacy via titulus regius, annulling their parents' marriage on claims of pre-contract. Historians still debating if it was legal truth or fabricated lie to justify the usurpation. Some arguing Richard's northern support bolstered his claim while southern lords viewed him as tyrant. Others insisting Tudor propaganda later twisted him into a hunchbacked villain to whitewash their own conquest. Absurdly, in an era when kings consulted soothsayers who divined futures from the entrails of sacrificial goats, talk about a gut-wrenching forecast that's messier than a bad breakup text. These omens often predicted doom for usurpers, and you grapple with the injustice of it all. Your rule shadowed by suspicion that festers like an untreated wound. The vanished heir's a void that sucks in whispers of murder, sadder than a protector who promised safety only to deliver silence. The psychological chill deepening as you issue reforms improving justice for the common folk with parliaments that curb noble excesses, yet the empty tower chambers haunt your dreams. A surprising twist revisiting Edward IV's lavish court where his sudden death left a power vacuum you filled with iron resolve. Facing accusations of cold-blooded kinslaying that historians debate as fact or fiction, some pointing to contemporary accounts of smothering with pillows, others to lack of evidence suggesting survival in disguise. Sarcastically, it's almost comical how clutching this throne feels like winning a rigged lottery, where the prize is a lifetime of paranoia, worse than inheriting a family business riddled with embezzlement scandals and disloyal employees plotting your ouster. But the clever commentary dissolves as you convene council, nobles like the Stanleys hedging their bets with hidden loyalties that shift like sand underfoot. The sensory struggle mounting as the heat turns oppressive, chafing your composure amid the cloying scent of courtly perfumes masking body odour in unventilated halls. The iron taste persisting like a metallic undercurrent to every meal shared with potential traitors. You zoom out for a poetic breath. The throne room expanding into the sprawling London streets where fog rolls off the Thames like veiled secrets. Commoners whispering of the prince's fate in taverns where ale flows like unspoken regrets. Their lives lyrical threads tangled in royal webs, fragile as spider silk in a gust. And you ponder the factual irony Richard's capable administration, holding parliaments that address corruption and quell dissent, contrasts sharply with the suspicion that clings like damp mist. Historians debating if his reign's brevity cut short at Bosworth was due to genuine tyranny or the machinations of Lancastrian exiles like Henry Tudor, who exploited the vanished heir's mystery to rally support. Some arguing Titulus Regius was a legal masterstroke, others seeing it as the fatal overreach that alienated Yorkist factions. The wet wool's mutated stickiness now dries into stiff folds that chafe your elbows like nagging remorse. The numbness in your fingers from gripping the sceptre, giving way to a prickling unease as letters arrive from disaffected lords. The cloying scent intensifying with incense burned to ward off evil spirits that many believe haunt the tower since the boy's disappearance. A shocking detail where guards reported strange cries in the night that historians dismiss as folklore or attribute to guilty consciences. The torchlight steadies in the chamber but casts accusing shadows that elongate like fingers pointing blame, mutated into golden illusions that conceal the sharp pang of isolation, where even your wife Anne Neville, revisited from Warwick's earlier betrayals with a sad twist, she who lost a father to this war now shares your bed, amid whispers of her own doubts offers little solace, facing the challenge by standing loyally yet haunted by the injustice of a crown won through vanishings that stain your legacy forever. Sarcastically, ruling with this suspicion slick on every decision feels like managing a startup where your co-founders plot a hostile takeover behind your back, worse than navigating office politics with a team of backstabbers disguised as allies. But the empathy for Richard surges in a twist he a skilled warrior from Towton's fields, now trapped in a web of his own spinning, the psychological chill deepening as foreign powers like France back pretenders who exploit the heir's mystery, leaving you to question if this iron grasp will secure the throne or crush it under the weight of doubt. The strange visual of a raven pecking at a discarded glove on the windowsill, its black feathers gleaming like omens in the torchlight, lingers amid the chamber's hush, a mood shift to paranoid vigilance as night falls, whispering that vanished heirs cast longer shadows than any living rival. You rise from the throne, the wet wool easing its sticky hold in the cooler evening air that filters through arrow slits, chafing less, but the unease persistent like the doubts that refuse to fade. The iron taste a faint echo as you pace the corridors where empty echoes amplify every step. The sensory struggle subsiding into a tense watchfulness that mirrors the realm's fragile state. The shocking persistence of the prince's tale ballads, sung in taverns claiming they live in Flanders, or perished by pillow fuels, unrest that historians debate as Yorkist propaganda or genuine folklore born of grief, sadder than lost innocence fueling endless wars. Sarcastically, it's like a royal family scandal that goes viral without social media, worse than tabloid headlines that bury truth under sensational lies. But the empathy for the Woodville Queen swells, sanctuary-bound and grieving, facing the challenge by plotting from the shadows where her influence lingers like perfume in a sealed room. The poetic reflection deepens, the palace fading into the starlit sky where constellations mock earthly ambitions. A lyrical hush over the city that masks the undercurrents of fear, fragile as the silence before a storm's first rumble. And you ponder if this suspicion will consume you or be quenched by decisive action. The strange visual of moonlight glinting on the Thames like silver threads, weaving fate's tapestry, leaves a chill that settles deep, shifting the mood to one of resolute isolation as the night deepens. You retire to your chambers, the wet wool discarded for drier linens that chafe less against your skin, the iron taste fading to nothingness as sleep eludes you amid the whispers, the torchlight outside waning into embers that glow like dying hopes. The shocking revelation of Richard's northern progress, parading loyalty while suppressing southern doubts. Historians arguing it was genuine reform or mere facade, sadder than a king isolated by his own grasp. Sarcastically, it's like hosting a party where half the guests plot your demise over the punch bowl, worse than a networking event full of fake smiles and real knives. But the empathy for Anne Neville deepens, her health failing amid the stress, facing the challenge with quiet dignity that belies her inner turmoil. A twist revisiting Warwick's betrayal where family ties bind and break in equal measure. The musty air from the tower creeps into your dreams, the chafing of suspicion, a constant companion, the sensory struggle evolving into a dreamlike haze where vanished airs beckon from the shadows, questioning if this iron grasp will hold or slip away in the coming storm. The strange visual of a cracked mirror reflecting fragmented faces lingers, a psychological chill that refuses to thaw, shifting the mood to one of impending reckoning as dawn approaches. You awaken to birdsong, the wet wool forgotten but the doubts persistent, the iron taste a morning aftertaste of last night's wine, the torchlight reborn as sunlight filtering through curtains, mutated into a harsh light that exposes every flaw. The shocking news of Henry Tudor's gathering forces in exile fuels the paranoia, historians debating if Richard's intelligence network failed or if fate conspired against him, sadder than a ruler blind to the threats encircling his throne. Sarcastically, it's like ignoring spam emails until your account's hacked, worse than overlooking red flags in a relationship that's doomed from the start. But the empathy for the common folk swells, bearing the brunt of taxes for Richard's preparations, facing the challenge by enduring in silence where their voices count for naught. The poetic dawn breaks, the palace bathed in light that chases shadows but not suspicions, a lyrical promise of day amid night's fears, fragile as the grasp on a throne slick with blood and doubt. And you ponder if this chapter will end in glory or tragedy. The strange visual of a spider web glistening in the window, trapping dew like unshed tears, leaves a chill that lingers, shifting the mood to determined vigilance as the day unfolds. You drift now through the fading echoes of England's fractured past, the crimson fields and shadowed thrones dissolving like mist in the gentle dawn, where the once sharp clash of ambitions softens into a quiet murmur, carried on a breeze that whispers through empty halls, the torchlight dimming to a soft, golden haze that caresses the stone walls like a lover's final touch, its warm flicker yielding to the subtle glow of starlight filtering through cracked windows, where the wet wool of your cloak, heavy with the weight of centuries, begins to lighten, unraveling thread by thread into nothingness as the chill in your bones eases into a soothing warmth, like embers cooling in a hearth long after the fire has sighed its last breath. The iron taste on your tongue fades to a faint, sweet memory, like the last drop of wine from a forgotten chalice, as you let go of the gripping suspicions and vanished airs, their stories settling into the silent archives of time, where kings and queens, once fierce in their pursuits, now rest in marble tombs that cradle them gently. The wind outside the palace walls rustling leaves like pages turning in an ancient book, closing on tales of betrayal and unity with a soft, inevitable hush. You feel the environment unravel around you, the grand banquet halls emptying of their ghostly revelers, chairs standing vacant like sentinels in repose, the Thames flowing slower now, its waters murmuring lullabies to the sleeping city where fog lifts lazily, revealing a sky painted in pastel hues that promise renewal without the clamour of crowns or the sting of swords. The sensory motifs that haunted your journey, the flickering light, the clinging damp, the metallic bite mutate one final time into serene echoes, the torchlight breathing its last as a candle's flame bows gracefully to extinction, the wet wool evaporating into ether, leaving your skin bare and unburdened, the iron dissolving into the ether like dew kissed by morning sun, and you breathe deeper, slower, your chest rising and falling in rhythm with the world's quiet pulse, where lessons of ambition's folly and the fragile bloom of peace settle into your dreams like feathers on still water. As the halls grow silent, chairs creaking faintly in the emptiness, you sense the figures of history retreating into portraits that gaze benignly from the walls, their eyes softening with the wisdom of ages past, inviting you to release the grip of the past and surrender to the embrace of slumber, where no more roses thorn the path, only petals drifting on a gentle stream. And in this fading whisper, the story closes its eyes,